The rain had been falling over the Carter Ranch since before sunrise, turning the dirt roads into muddy paths and covering the fields with a silver mist. Inside the large farmhouse, everyone was busy preparing for the wealthy rancher's birthday celebration. Daniel Carter, a successful rancher in his early 40s, walked into the kitchen expecting his usual black coffee. Instead, the sweet smell of cinnamon, butter, and baked apples stopped him at the doorway. On the wooden counter sat a golden brown apple pie, still warm from the oven. Daniel frowned and looked around the empty kitchen. "Who made this apple pie?" he asked. Nobody answered. The cooks exchanged confused glances. One finally said, "Not me, Mr. Carter." Daniel slowly approached the pie, wondering who had made it. He cut a small slice and tasted it. The moment. The warm apple filling touched his tongue. Something inside him changed. The flavor was familiar, almost painfully so. It reminded him of his mother, who had died many years earlier. She used to make the same kind of apple pie every Sunday morning when Daniel was a boy. He remembered sitting beside her while she rolled the dough, stealing pieces of cinnamon apples when she wasn't looking. For years, he had searched for that exact taste, but nothing had ever come close. Daniel looked at the pie again. "Whoever made this knows exactly what they're doing," he whispered. Then he noticed a small flour mark leading from the kitchen toward the back hallway. Daniel followed the trail and stopped when he saw a woman kneeling near the pantry, wiping the floor. She looked to be in her early 30s, with dark brown hair tied neatly behind her head and a simple faded blue dress beneath a white apron. She immediately stood when she noticed him. "Good morning, sir," she said quietly. Daniel recognized her. He had seen her working around the ranch for months, always cleaning, carrying laundry, helping in the kitchen, and making sure everyone else had what they needed. Yet he realized he had never actually spoken to her. "Did you make the apple pie?" he asked. She hesitated before answering. "Yes, sir." Daniel studied her expression. She looked nervous, as though she expected to be punished for entering the kitchen without permission. "You made it before sunrise?" Daniel asked. She nodded. "I hope that was okay." Daniel glanced back toward the kitchen. "Why did you make it?" The woman looked down at her hands. "I heard you telling the cook yesterday that you missed your mother's apple pie." Daniel became completely still. He had forgotten making that comment. It had been a private conversation he thought nobody had heard. The woman continued, "My mother taught me her recipe when I was little. It isn't exactly the same, but I thought maybe it would remind you of home." Daniel didn't know what to say. He looked at the woman carefully. There was no pride in her voice, no expectation of praise, and certainly no request for money. She had simply made something because she believed it might make someone happy. "What's your name?" Daniel finally asked. She quietly told him. Daniel repeated it, making sure he remembered. Then he asked how long she had worked at the ranch. She explained that she had been there for several months, taking whatever work was available. She cleaned rooms, washed clothes, prepared meals when necessary, and sometimes helped the stable workers. Daniel suddenly realized how much work she must have been doing while everyone else treated her as if she were invisible. "Does anyone know you made this?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, sir. I didn't make it for anyone to know." Daniel looked at the pie again. For a man who owned thousands of acres and employed dozens of people, that simple answer struck him harder than any business failure ever had. Before he could respond, one of the ranch managers entered the kitchen and casually asked whether the breakfast table was ready. He noticed the woman standing there and immediately told her to finish cleaning the pantry. Daniel raised his hand. "She's done." The manager looked surprised. Daniel pointed toward the pie. "She made this." The manager shrugged. "Oh, I didn't know." Daniel's expression hardened. "That's exactly the problem. The woman looked at him with uncertainty. Daniel picked up another slice of pie and smiled for the first time that morning. "This is the best apple pie I've tasted in years." Her eyes widened. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, someone had finally noticed her work, but Daniel had no idea that the story behind her quiet kindness was far more painful than he could imagine. Daniel watched the woman return to her work, but something about her quiet reaction stayed in his mind. She hadn't smiled proudly when he praised the pie. Instead, she seemed almost uncomfortable receiving attention. Later that afternoon, Daniel asked his manager about her. He learned that she had arrived in Texas after losing her previous job while caring for her father. After her father passed away, she had struggled to find steady work. She had taken the ranch position because she needed a place to live and a paycheck. Daniel felt a deep sense of guilt. She had been working around his home every day, yet he had never once asked if she was doing okay. That evening, Daniel found her sitting alone on the back porch, watching the rain disappear beyond the fields. He carried 2 cups of coffee and placed one beside her. She immediately stood. "You don't have to get up," he said gently. She sat again, surprised that the ranch owner wanted to talk with her. Daniel asked about her father, and she told him how he had taught her to cook when she was a little girl. Apple pie had been his favorite dessert. Every Sunday, they would bake one together. After he became sick, she continued making pies because the smell of cinnamon made him smile, even on his hardest days. Daniel listened silently, realizing that her gift had not simply been a dessert. It was a memory she had shared with him. The next morning, Daniel walked into the kitchen before anyone else arrived. He found the woman preparing breakfast. He placed an envelope on the table. She looked worried when she saw it. "What is this?" she asked. "Your new employment agreement," Daniel said. "I want you to become the head cook at the ranch." She immediately shook her head. "Sir, I don't have formal training." Daniel smiled. "You don't need a certificate to know how to make people feel at home." He explained that he had watched her work and knew she was responsible, patient, and talented. He also increased her salary and gave her regular hours. She stared at the papers, with tears in her eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Daniel answered honestly. "Because I finally noticed what everyone else overlooked." A week later, the ranch hosted a large family dinner. Daniel personally asked her to prepare the dessert. When guests tasted the apple pie, everyone praised it. Daniel stood at the head of the table and told them who had made it. The woman looked embarrassed as everyone applauded. One guest asked for the recipe while another complimented her kindness. For perhaps the first time in years, she felt visible. Daniel watched her smile and realized something important. Wealth had allowed him to buy almost anything, but it had never taught him how to recognize the value of an ordinary act of kindness. That pie had reminded him that the richest things in life could not be purchased. Months passed, and the ranch changed in small but meaningful ways. The woman became an important part of the household, and Daniel made sure every employee received respect. He started eating breakfast with the ranch workers instead of alone in his office. He learned their names, listened to their concerns, and thanked them for their work. One Sunday morning, he walked into the kitchen and found another apple pie cooling beside the window. He smiled. "Is that for me?" he asked. She laughed softly. "Of course." Daniel cut a slice and tasted it. The familiar cinnamon flavor filled the room. "Still the best pie in Texas?" he said. She smiled and replied, "Maybe it's because you finally learned to say thank you." Daniel laughed, realizing she was right. The pie had changed more than his morning. It had changed the way he saw people, kindness, and the true meaning of being rich.